may be back as a consultant, may be quite wed to the way it was done, the same way it had been done for however many years they held that position, the contacts they knew to reach out to make that position successful. And so the innovation at that next tier of the younger leadership that needs to fall on their face to learn, that needs to find their own path, that needs to, or might have a different network that they can access for different, perhaps better resources and feedback, gets capped, because you don't want to offend that knowledgeable entity from whom you still require information or guidance or what have you. And I think that sometimes that can be quite a predicament, and also quite a loss to the university of a new database, a new information approach, or a new possibly better viable, more innovative direction. And it's just because of that retention of that old, which isn't always necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes that institutional knowledge is vital and necessary and we need it, but it can keep the institutional knowledge from growing in a new direction.
Yeah, that's a really important, powerful point, I think, because if we really think about that, when we bring people back to access their expertise and their organizational knowledge, it's generally to sort of address some kind of technical fix that needs to be done. We don't often spend the time helping develop the capacities that person needs to be a good mentor, a good guide. We just say, look, we don't know how to twist the flux capacitor to the left anymore. Like, can somebody come in and show us how to twist the flux? They're like, yeah, I would stand on one foot, burn some stage, and then twist the flux capacitor. When in fact, maybe you didn't need to go through all of that, right? In the back, please.
Some old-style micromanagers might not allow their employees to do independent thinking and problem-solving, thinking outside the box to get something accomplished, and will tell them step-by-step how to approach something to the goal. Whereas new leadership, new supervisors will say, this is the goal, this is where you got to get out there, how to get there.
Yeah.
And, it depends on how, anymore, employees really need to be comfortable working autonomously, taking initiative, thinking for themselves. We need to have more problem-solving courses on campus. I took a lot of college really helped. But, it seems like that would lead more to successful outcomes.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm deeply appreciative for Luana inviting me and asking all of you to sort of give up at this time to hear me talk about some of these ideas, because I think this is the kind of conversation we have to have, right? Like, most of the conversations, if it was like when I ran a school, most of the conversations in the faculty or staff or leadership team meeting were like, okay, here's the field trip form, make sure you check out the left box or right box, okay, we got this coming up next. Not talking about these deeper capacities and thinking about how we are as leaders in our own work, right? There's a lot of pressure for you to get the work done. But developing the capacities to get that work done in a way that's meaningful to you and connects to larger goals of the university, that's important work for you to be doing. And not just you, well beyond all of you, right? Because imagine if we started having this level of dialogue across the campus. It'd be quite powerful, wouldn't it? And so when we think about these organizations and we really think about moving forward deeper in this 21st century, I've sort of been thinking about what does the old routine look like and what might the future look like. And so I've sort of organized these things. And so in sort of the old school way of thinking is all about hierarchy, command, and control. The new way of thinking about organizing is about network and connections. It's a move away from centralized command and control leadership to distributed leadership and responsibility across the unit. From independence, where we're all doing our own thing, to interdependence, where my success is your success and your success is my success. A move from specialist to being cross-trained generalist. A move from policy and procedure with its rigid and narrow focus to being guided by simple, clear, and shared parameters about the way in which we're going to do our work. How about honoring people for the professionalism they bring? How about recognizing them for the skills and talents they have? How about developing in them the capacities that are necessary to better do their work? What does a system look like that does that? I think that's the question we have to ask ourselves. And in doing this, we have to sort of think about really smart people. And so this really smart guy says the following. The world we have made as a result of the level of thinking we have done thus far creates problems we cannot solve at the same level of thinking that created them. You remember my example before? We focus on what we didn't do well, and then we generate a bunch of lists about what to do better, right? That's using the same level of thinking that created those problems to generate more solutions. We need to fundamentally change the story. We need to start from a different focus point. We need to honor the people that are doing the work. And in doing that, we've got to also be able to think freely and openly about our own work. So let me give an example of that. So let's pretend you've got a piece of newspaper in front of you, just a single sheet from the New York Times or the Union Tribune or whatever the newspaper is. You've got a single sheet of newspaper in front of you. And I'm going to ask you to fold that piece of paper once in half, twice in half, all the way up to 40 times. Now, regular mere mortals can fold it about 7 times. Like if you were to take a piece of paper right now, you can fold it in half at about 7 times, maybe 8 if you're super strong. But beyond that, that goes beyond the capacity of people to be able to fold paper. So now here's my question to all of you leadership folks who are thinking about the world in a different way. On the 40th fold, how thick is that single sheet of newspaper that you've taken and folded in half and in half again 40 times? How thick is that piece of paper? So take a guess. You were the bravest one to show something.
3/4 of an inch.
3/4 of an inch. Excellent guess. How about another guess? An inch. How about another guess? So we got 3/4 of an inch. What else we got?
Half an inch.
Half an inch.
An inch and a half.
Inch and a half. Any other guesses?
About a foot.
About a foot. Okay, we've got a divergent thinker in the room. He guesses a foot. Anybody else? On the 40th fold, the 40th fold of that newspaper, it reaches this place. If you take that single sheet and you fold it on top of itself, on that 40th fold, it almost reaches the moon. Now, there are going to be any number of doubters in this room. I encourage that. You can fact check me, Google it, check it out. It's a simple mathematical equation. The paper doubles in size each time we fold it, right? So now the question is, what does this say about our ability to imagine what's possible? Do we constrain ourselves artificially about what's possible, what we can actually do? The Beatles, Eleanor Roosevelt, and Bob Marley, which probably would make a heck of a dinner party, said something in their songs and their writing that rings really true. And that's, we hold the keys to whatever questions we may have. It's within us. The chains that we encumber ourselves with are typically of our own doing. How do we undo those? How do we really release ourselves to think fundamentally differently about what the world can look like? Let's illustrate this in another way. This is going to be the meditation part of the afternoon, hopefully not the nap part. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to close your eyes for a second. And I'd like you to take out your wallets and your purses and empty all the money on the table. Oh, no, sorry. Okay. So just, this is how we're going to handle this budget problem. Okay, what I'd like you to do for real, keep your eyes closed. Everybody back here. We're those vice chancellors. Okay, so eyes closed, you're thinking about the Federal Express logo. I'd like you to get that in your mind's eye, be really clear about that logo. What does it look like? Take a good look at it. Maybe you followed a truck in today. Many of you in this room probably handled the Federal Express logo sometime in the last couple of weeks. Get a good picture in your mind's eye about what that looks like. As you're looking at that logo, what I'd like you to look for is the arrow that's in that logo. There's an arrow. You go ahead and just look for it. go ahead and open up your eyes. How many of you could see the arrow when you thought about the logo? Show your hand. Okay, so about 4 or 5 of you, 6 of you out of the room. So were you thinking about this particular logo? This is what you were thinking about, right? Could be green, maybe. Do you see the arrow in it as you look at it now? There it is. Let's help you if you don't. So it's possible that you followed these trucks, you've looked at these packages. This has always been there.
Wow.
Now, here's the important message. The important message is, how do we find the extraordinary within the ordinary? This is something you've seen over and over and over again, right? This is not surprising to you. And for those of you that didn't see the arrow, how do you release yourself from those encumbrances, our pre-understandings? How do we free ourselves about what's possible? How do we dream and dream big? How do we look at things in the world and see them from new eyes? It's a really exciting time, I think, on this campus. I'm hopefully not naively, but optimistic about what the future holds. Our ability to craft a different tomorrow is now. We will craft the same kind of tomorrow unless we think about things differently. Unless we give ourselves the permission to imagine and think completely absurd things like a piece of paper reaching the moon, or seeing things in a new way, like an arrow inside of a logo that we see constantly. And while we're doing that, sometimes other things get in our way. Let me give you an example. Some of you may have been thinking about this on your way over here, Dunker's candle problem. I think I overheard a few people talking about it at the lunch table. They're like, what's your thoughts on the Dunker candle problem, Daly? I don't know. So you may be thinking to yourself, what's the Dunker candle problem? So I will tell you. I'm going to ask you to imagine something. This is a day of imagination, right? So let's pretend you're in a room, and this room has corkboard on the walls. So you're surrounded by walls that have corkboard on them. That's sort of represented by this. And I'm going to give you a task. The task is to light the candle and make sure that the wax doesn't drip on the floor. That's your task.